You know that specific kind of quiet that happens when you realize you're lost? Not the "I missed my exit" kind of lost. I'm talking about the quiet where the streetlights disappear. The pavement turns to gravel and the voice in your GPS gets that weird, robotic stutter like it's struggling to remember what a road even is. It's in those moments when you're just a tiny island of car light in a sea of black trees that your brain starts doing the math wrong. It tells you that the shape in the tree line wasn't a deer. It tells you that the crackle on the radio wasn't static, but a whisper. We rely on our maps, our phones, and our rational brains to keep us safe on the road. But what happens when the map is wrong? What happens when the house you find at the end of the road was never supposed to be there? Or worse, what if you find out someone is living in the house with you, without you ever knowing? Tonight we're taking a ride down 3 of the most disturbing true roads you'll ever travel. These aren't ghost stories about creaky doors, it's fine. These are stories from real people who drove into the dark and came back with something they can't unsee. So lock the doors. Check your back seat. And for the love of God, if the GPS tells you to turn onto a road that doesn't look right, just turn around. And these are 3 true scary stories that will make you afraid of the dark and the silence that comes with it. This first story comes from a user named lost_driver_09. Yes. And it's the kind of story that makes me never want to follow a shortcut again, no matter how much traffic I'm sitting in. It was late October and he was driving home from a friend's wedding in rural Pennsylvania. If you've ever driven through the backwoods of Pennsylvania at 2 in the morning, you know it's not just dark. It's an oppressive, hungry kind of dark that swallows the sound of your engine and replaces it with the sound of your own heartbeat. He was tired of the monotony of the highway and the steady hum of the asphalt. So when his GPS, one of those older Garmin units, you stick to the windshield piped up with a robotic turn left in 500 feet, he didn't question it. He figured it was one of those local shortcuts that only the locals and the satellites know about. The turn took him off the 2-lane blacktop and onto a narrow, unmarked gravel track that looked more like a logging trail than a road. Immediately, he felt a shift. It wasn't just the bumpy ride, it was the silence. The further he drove, the quieter it got. The trees, these huge, ancient pines, started leaning in so close they were scraping the sides of his Honda Civic with this dry, skeletal sound. The headlights didn't illuminate the path. It just reflected off a wall of white fog that seemed to be waiting for him. He checked his phone. At 0 bars, which was expected out there, but the Garmin screen was still lit up with a confident blue line. Then the screen flickered. Just once, then again. The blue line representing the road just vanished. It was replaced by a pixelated gray mess that looked like static snow on an old TV. But in the middle of the noise, a single text box popped up. It didn't say recalculating or lost satellite signal. It said, "You are here. Exit the car." He stopped the car dead in the middle of the trail. A rational person would have put it in reverse and gotten the hell out. But he was also a curious person, and the fog was so thick he couldn't see behind him anyway. He killed the engine to listen. That's when he heard it, not an animal, not the wind, but the sound of a radio, specifically. The sound of a very old, staticky, 1940s love song playing from somewhere deep in the woods to his left. There were no houses, no power lines, just the forest floor covered in wet, rotting leaves and that damn tinny music floating through the fog like a ghost. He grabbed the flashlight from his glove box, the kind of cheap plastic one that flickers if you don't hit it just right, and stepped out onto the gravel. The air was cold, the kind of wet cold that seeps into your bones. And it smelled wrong. Not like pine or earth, but like wet rust and old rancid bacon grease. The beam of the flashlight cut a path through the fog, and he followed the sound of the music. About 50 feet off the trail, the trees suddenly stopped. It's not like a clearing you find in nature. This was a cut. The ground was flat and packed down, and right there, under the canopy of the fog, was a room, not a house. A room, it was a single, small structure, maybe 10 by 10 feet, with no other walls attached to it. It looked like a hunting cabin that someone had just dropped out of the sky, with tar paper siding and a single window that glowed with a sickly orange light. The window was grimy, but he could see inside. There was a small, dusty table, a wooden chair facing away from him toward a far wall. And on the table was an old Philco cathedral radio, the source of the music. And in the chair, he could see the back of a head, just a silhouette. Totally still, sitting there listening to the crackling love song. It was a figure wearing what looked like a wide-brimmed hat. He whispered hello, but the figure didn't move. He stepped closer, crunching a twig under his boot. The music cut out instantly. The orange light in the room flickered and died. And then he saw the figure in the chair move. It didn't stand up, didn't turn around. The silhouette just slowly, deliberately tilted its head, just the head to one side, as if it was trying to hear him breathing. The cheap flashlight chose that exact moment to flicker and die, plunging him into absolute darkness. He dropped the flashlight and ran blind, smashing into trees, cutting his face on branches, not stopping until he slammed face first into the cold metal of his car door, scrambled inside, locked the doors, and jammed the key in the ignition. The Garmin screen was back on. The blue line was back. It said, "Proceed to route." He drove forward, tires spinning in the gravel. And about 100 yards later, the trees opened up onto the main highway he'd been looking for an hour earlier. He didn't stop driving until he saw the lights of a 24-hour gas station. It was covered in scratches and had a gash on his cheek from a branch he didn't even feel. The most terrifying part, when he got home and looked at his car in the garage light, the scratches on the side doors weren't from branches. They were long, thin, vertical scratches, like fingernails trying to pry the door handle open. He hasn't used a GPS since. This next story is a different breed of fear. It's not the fear of finding something in the woods. It's the suffocating fear of realizing you've been sharing your home with something that was never supposed to be there. Hey, this was posted by a woman named Sarah J., who had just bought her first home, a beautiful old Victorian fixer-upper in a small town in New England. She was a single mom with a young daughter, and they were over the moon to finally have a place with a yard and a big, spooky basement that her daughter called the dungeon. Like any new homeowner, Sarah spent the first few weeks doing the fun stuff, painting walls, hanging pictures, and ignoring the weird sounds old houses make. But the sound under the kitchen floor was hard to ignore. It was a rhythmic tap, scrape, tap, scrape. It sounded like someone dragging a heavy metal tool across the dirt floor of the crawlspace. She called an exterminator, thinking it was a raccoon or a groundhog. The guy came, shimmied his way under the house with a flashlight, and came out looking pale. "Ma'am," he said, wiping dirt off his knees, "I couldn't find any animal tracks, but you got a lot of empty bottles down there. And some old clothes. And the dirt it's dug out." Like someone made a little bed in the corner. Sarah's blood ran cold. The previous owners had been an elderly couple who moved to Florida. They didn't seem like the type to be squatters in their own crawl space. That night, she was lying in bed reading when she heard the tap. Scrape again, but this time it was right beneath her bedroom floor. She froze. I thought about calling the police, but what would she say? "Hi, I think there's a ghost in my dirt basement." Then her daughter started crying from the nursery. She ran in to find the 3-year-old standing up in her crib, pointing at the corner of the room, screaming. And she said the words that will haunt Sarah forever. "Mommy, the man with the hat is under my bed. He says he wants to come out." Sarah grabbed her daughter and locked themselves in the bathroom for the rest of the night. The next morning, she convinced a skeptical police officer to come check the house. When the officer got on his hands and knees with his mag light and looked into the crawlspace access panel in the basement wall, he went dead silent. He didn't find a ghost. He found an old, tattered army green cot with a filthy blanket and a stack of spiral notebooks, pages yellow and curly. The notebooks were diaries. They belonged to a man named Harold. In the pages, Harold wrote about how he had been a transient in the 1970s, and he'd found this house's crawlspace unlocked one winter. He'd been living down there in the dark for years. He wrote about listening to the family upstairs, the squeak of their shoes, the hum of their television, the laughter of their children. Called the family the upstairs people, and the most disturbing entry of all was the last one, dated just a few years before Sarah bought the house. It read, "I'm too old to climb out now. The dirt is cold. I just want to sleep. But the upstairs people are so loud, I wish I could go up and ask them to be quiet." The police officer looked at Sarah and just said, "He's not down here now, but..." And that's his bed. Sarah sold the house less than a month later. She moved into an apartment on the 3rd floor, a place with no crawl space at all. She told me she still wakes up in the middle of the night and holds her breath, listening for the tap, scrape of a shovel on the floor below. Our final story comes from a user named TowerJunkie_77. And this one hits a nerve that I didn't even know I had. It's a story about radio waves and the things that get stuck in them. Tower Junkie. Is a hobbyist one of those people who loves ham radios and CB channels and trying to bounce signals off the atmosphere just to see who's listening on the other side of the world? He lived in a very flat, very empty part of the Texas Panhandle. There's an old, decommissioned AT&T microwave tower about 2 miles from his property. It's a massive, rusted metal skeleton standing out in the middle of a cow pasture. And local legend says it's haunted by the ghost of a technician who fell from the top in the 1960s. Most people just call it the Needle. One night, he was in his shack, which is what radio nerds call their hobby rooms, scanning the shortwave bands. It was around 3 a.m., the witching hour of the airwaves, when the ionosphere does weird things, and signals travel hundreds of miles. The air was full of the usual ghosts, the bleeps and bloops of Russian number stations, the overlapping Spanish preachers, the robotic pings of over-the-horizon radar. But then he hit a dead spot. Pure, heavy silence. He was about to turn the dial when a voice cut through the static like a razor blade. It was a man's voice. It was strained, raspy, and speaking in a monotone that didn't sound quite human, more like a text-to-speech program that was shorting out. It said, November 274. Whiskey. I am at the Needle. I cannot find the ground. The light is red. Please, can anyone copy? I cannot find the ground. Now, N274W is the old FCC call sign for that exact tower. There was no doubt. It was a distress call. But the voice didn't sound scared. It sounded lost, like someone trapped in a dream trying to wake up. Tower Junkie grabbed his handheld radio, jumped in his truck, and drove out to the pasture where the needle stood. He figured some dumb kid was pranking him, or maybe there was a homeless person up there who needed help. He parked at the base of the tower. The red beacon light at the top was blinking as it always had. He keyed his mic and said, "This is Kilo Alpha 5. I'm at the base of the needle. I read you over." He waited. The only response was the hum of the wind through the metal lattice of the tower. He'd shown his flashlight up. Nothing. Then his handheld crackled. That same raspy, flat voice came back. "I hear you. You are below me. But I am not above you. I am inside the light. I cannot find the ground." A shiver went down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold wind. He looked up at the blinking red beacon again. The light was steady. It wasn't blinking. It was a solid, burning, angry red glow that seemed to pulse with a faint, unnatural hum. And then he saw it just for a fraction of a second a dark shape against the red glow. It looked like a man standing on the top platform of the tower. The figure didn't fall or climb, it just sort of evaporated into the red light. The light blinked once, twice, and then went back to its normal, steady rhythm. The radio went dead silent. Tower Junkie drove home in a daze. The next morning, he checked his recordings. The digital recorder in his shack had captured everything. The call sign N274W, the raspy voice. But on the playback, he heard something he hadn't heard on the live feed. After his own transmission of "I read you," there was a burst of heavy, wet static, buried deep under the static. If you crank the volume to maximum and listen with noise-canceling headphones, you can hear what sounds like a man screaming. But it's not a scream of fear, it's a scream of silence. It's the sound of someone screaming from a place where sound doesn't exist. He never scanned that frequency again, said the radio waves out there feel different now. They feel heavy, like something is listening to him. And just like that, the signal cuts out. We're back at the end of the road with nothing but the hum of the engine and the lingering question of what we just heard. Were these just coincidences? Glitches in the matrix of our technology and our minds? Or is there something out there in the dark, in the static, and in the dirt beneath our feet that we were never meant to see? Something that the light of our phones and our GPS screens usually keeps hidden in the shadows. The next time you're driving at night and the GPS screen flickers, or the next time you hear a weird noise from your basement, just remember the stories of lost_driver_09, Sarah J, and Tower Junkie _77. Remember the room in the woods, the man under the bed, and the voice trapped in the light? If you have a story like this, something real that happened to you and you can't explain, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. Don't let it stay stuck in your head. Let it out. And if you're new around here and you've got a strong stomach for the weird and the unexplained, hit that subscribe button. We open the doors to the dark side of the road every single week. Until next time, keep your lights on, keep your doors locked, and keep an eye on the signal. You never know who or what might be trying to find the ground.